The night air in the dragon pit tasted of salt and ash, though the sea lay a mile beyond the city walls and the fires that had eaten the Red Keep were years gone out. Wind moved through the broken ribs of the ruined dome and made a sound like breath in the throat of a sleeping giant. The vaulted shadow, open to moon and stars, gathered on Arya Stark's cheeks and eyelids like soot. She stood at the edge of the dais, a square of cracked stone that had once borne dragon chains, and looked down at the great tiers where small folk, lords, and sellswords had gathered in their sober finery. The moon made armor pale as fish bellies and threw a cold row of light along the barrels of crossbows that were not raised. The banners were quiet. The torches hissed. Somewhere the city dogs were fighting over something that still bled. Jon Snow wore black wool and an old ringmail shirt. No crown sat on his dark head. His face had sharpened since winter. Grief had cut away softness and left the plain truth of him. The eyes that met hers were winter gray and very clear. At his side, Davos Seaworth stood with his hand folded in the other, stump hidden in the sleeve. Brienne of Tarth held her helm under one arm and scanned the tiered crowd without blinking. Samwell Tarly had a clutch of parchment and a quill he did not pretend he would not need. Ghost had come south with Jon. The direwolf's fur was the color of snow that has seen too many thaws, and his crimson gaze missed nothing. He lay stretched on stone at Jon's boots like a carved thing, but his ears sat forward and he smelled everyone twice. No throne would be raised here again, Jon had sworn. Iron would be for plows and hinges, not kings. But there were oaths to take that did not require iron. There were burdens to lay on shoulders that would not bend with less. He stepped closer. She smelled the smoke of him, sun-dried wool, leather. He had gone thinner and harder, but still he was Jon, and his hands were scarred in the places she remembered. Right forefinger, left thumb. He lifted a circlet from a faded velvet cushion Davos held. It was a narrow thing, dark iron hammered thin, set with small chips of dragonglass and a single moon-gray pearl. In the torchlight, the obsidian swallowed light and the pearl threw it back. He said, "Arya Stark of Winterfell, wolf of the north, sailor between coasts and student of shadows. You said once you were no lady. I would not make you one. I would make you what only you can be. You make me sound like a riddle," she said. Her voice did not carry, but the quiet in the dragon pit was a living creature. It bore her words to the far tiers as if curious of their weight. "Then learn me the answer," Jon said, and the corner of his mouth tilted up the way it had when they were children, when snowballs were missiles and bastards slept with direwolves in tumble-down keeps. "Westeros has had its politics of fear. What gain did they buy us? A mountain of skulls and a throne melted to a puddle. Spiders with bright webs, birds with cut tongues, sorcerers who called being honest foolish, sisters sold for safety, little boys made knives. Never again." The breeze lifted her hair and put the smell of the city in it. Night soil, roasting meat, tar, sweat, something sweet and medicinal from the houses of healing. She had known those smells at a run with a hot bread heel in her hand, feet black, hair a mat. She had known them with a belly that thought itself a cave. She knew them now with a blade at her back and an old coin sewn into her boot. She had thought once that she would be no one and had learned the edges of that lie. Her name sat in her like a weight and a compass. When she didn't speak, he lifted the circlet. "These are not the days of kings," he said, though they had made him something like one because someone must keep the peace and, gods be good, he would not reach for it if it daggered his hand. "But there must be wardens, not of marches and coasts only, of the spaces we thought were empty, of alleys and whispers and roads no one walks by day. Warden of shadows." She looked at the circlet. Dragonglass drank and held the torchlight like night water. "A pretty oath to make me the king's knife," she said lightly. Her mouth smiled. Her eyes did not. Davos's face creased. He looked to Jon as if to say, "We could do this elsewhere." But then he looked at Arya and his mouth decided to be quiet. He had seen her in her other faces. If Jon named her a knife in public, he would be sharpening her for 1,000 rumors. "You will not be my knife," Jon said. "I know the cut of you. You are blunt when you choose, and I don't want knives in the dark for my sake or any lord's. I want them for children in alleys and women by black rivers. I want the shadows to be a place where what lives there watches not to kill but to keep. We will not rule by fear. If we fail at that, what do we deserve? Arya heard in his words a stubbornness she knew as well as the space between her fingers. He would try to make a new thing in a world that ground new things underfoot. He would let the world break him rather than give up trying. If she helped him, the breaking might be slower. If she refused, fear would find another shape, and someone else would carve it. Warden of Shadows, she said. All right, but give me my own words for it. I thought you'd ask. He lifted the circlet then, and she bowed her dark head, the first time she had bowed her head to a crown as if it were not a threat or a weight. The iron touched her hair cold. The moon pearl pressed her brow cool, and the dragon glass sat at her temples like night. She remembered the pool in the house of black and white, how the faces had looked up at her through water as if to say, "What will you do with us?" The hush of the dragon pit deepened as if the whole city were listening from its more honest shadows. She said, "I take my oath on my own name. I will gather those who know the dark and ask teach to walk with lanterns instead of knives. When lives must be taken for lives to be kept, we will take them cleanly and with the name spoken. We will answer to the light we carry, not to whispers without faces. We will not make a trade of fear. We will listen until we hear the truth, and we will not be bought from it. This I swear by the gods I know and those I do not." The long, low sound the wind made among ribs exhaled. Someone in the tiers, a woman with a babe in arms, began to cry in the way men cry when their whole body remembers something. Brienne put her helm on again to hide her damp eyes. Davos nodded once, a sailor's nod to a good wind. Sam dabbed his mouth with the sleeve of his robe and began to write faster. Ghost stood up. The dire wolf walked to Arya and put his nose against her palm as if to say, "I smell the coin and the leather and the salt and the iron in your hair. I know you." She touched his head just once as she had when he was a little white blaze with 2 big feet. Jon said, "Rise, Arya Stark, Warden of Shadows. If you mean what you swore, we will hold the dark to a simple oath. If we fail, we will fail in the open." The words slid out among old ash and moonlight. It might have been nothing. It would be 1,000 small things if it was anything at all. They walked together afterward past the tears and the keystones that had fallen like teeth, past the half-grown figs that had found roots in dragon droppings long cured, past 6 Sellswords who would have shot her if she had drawn a blade because law must be law, out into the night, the open black bowl of the sky leaning down to the roofs and red tiles, the streets cutting their sharp edge dark. Torchlight from a cart that hawked river eels made the air oily. She could hear the water slapping stone at the quays, hear men singing low and off-key in 7 accents. "You won't like what comes of this," she told him. "Someone will try to make me your secret jailer. Or they will call me that whether or not it's true. They will say your hands are clean and your sisters are clever and mine are wet. I have fewer hands than people think," he said. "I have the ones I was born with and the ones I win by asking. I will not have hands other men cut for me. If they cannot believe that, let them ask Brienne what she will do to anyone who uses your name like that." Arya imagined Brienne's sword making that particular, honest sound as it left leather. She imagined the look on Lannister faces when a woman with honor spoke with the king's leave. She did not smile. Smile and somebody would say she was a girl again, and girls were careless in the ways she could not afford. "Sam will write your charter," Jon said. "Davos will speak the oaths. Gendry is forging the pins. Black iron with a wolf and a lantern." Gendry! She let the one word do enough work that Jon looked sideways at her face and then away again like a boy who had once made a snowball too hard. "He is Lord of Storm's End and knows metal. He likes making useful things." He said he always liked making useful things. "Good," she said. She let herself remember dirty hands and a laugh that sounded like someone had found something and liked the look of it. None of that mattered and all of it did. The last years had been a work of unmaking and making. She knew how to carry 2 truths and not drop either. They climbed the hill to the burned ruin of the keep and the new halls thrown up in its shadow. Good green wood and stone without pretension, sharp-roofed against rain, shutters that would hold in a gale. Men with torches waited by doors, and one opened for them like a toothless grin. They went in and the world brightened. Someone had brought beeswax candles up from Old Town, and the air smelled of their honey. A great cedar table had been planed smooth, and a map of the realm was engraved upon it and filled with ink where the rivers ran. Brienne's white cloak hung on a wooden peg. Davos set down the cushion with the circlet as gently as if it were a child. Sansa Stark sat at the far end of the table. She wore winter colors because she always had. A deep blue gown that fit her at the shoulders like a truth and fell to the floor like a decision. Her auburn hair was braided in the northern way, a crown of plaited ropes. A wolf brooch pinned her cloak, and it was not the one their father had worn. It was the one she had hammered herself, a thing made to say, "This is mine and I will keep it." "I have listened," she said, before either could begin their long-rehearsed correctness. "I have heard the oath. I have considered the doors this opens and the walls it makes holes in. I will bind my realm to yours in this at least. The North will recognize the Warden of Shadows and permit your lantern-bearers in our streets and woods. But I will not have a second kingdom under my own. They will answer to a northern council when they walk my snow." "What council?" Jon asked. "One made of those the shadows most belong to," Sansa said, pale blue eyes steady. "A soldier who knows dirt and blood, a healer who knows what fear does to the body, a mother who has had a child taken from her, a child old enough to speak what they see, and a maester who can read and write but cannot hide behind a chain. No one on that council will be of great house. If your lantern-bearers can explain themselves to such people and be guided by them, they may walk in Winterfell and White Harbor and through the Wolfswood without their lanterns being mistaken for beacons to lure ships to wreck." Jon rubbed his jaw as if to hide a smile. "You have thought about this." Sansa's mouth lifted an inch. "Littlefinger taught me the cost of shadows. Mother taught me the cost of letting men make counsels too fine to be spoken to. If this is to be done, let it be done in the open and let it answer to the open. I will send my letters tonight." Arya leaned her hip into the table and folded her arms. "I like the and the child. I want the child's name written at the top of every page of minutes, in big letters. I want men to remember who judges them." Sansa's eyes gentled. "Do you remember the names of the children you could not save?" she asked. Arya's mouth went tight. She did not answer. Ghost's head came up as if in answer for her, a soft chuff like wind in pine. The map on the table showed rivers like veins and mountains like knuckles. Arya traced a finger along the trident's forks. "Arya," Jon said. "I remember," she said, and her voice was flat and did not crack. "I will make the names of the living heavier than the names of the dead. That is what you have made me for." Sam Tarly coughed and pushed a parchment forward. "I have written a charter in the manner of the Night's Watch, taking what is useful and breaking what is not. I added an article about witnesses. A lantern-bearer must have a witness when they act, two when they act with force. They will speak the names of those they protect and be bound by those names." I thought, well, it seemed to me that if you will be wardens of what cannot be seen, then you must be seen when it counts. "Good," Arya said. "You are less foolish than you look, Sam." Sam's ears went red. "I am less brave than I look too," he said. "But I can write laws." "Bravery is overvalued," Davos said. "Courage is quieter. It eats less. If we're to feed it at all, we'd best put it to work," Brienne said, and her voice in the hall made Ghost stand up straighter. "When do you ride, my Lady Warden?" "After dawn," Arya said, though she knew it would be night again when she left the walls. If there was to be trust, it would not be built by a lady going out by noon with banners flying. "First to the Riverlands. I'll go to the place where the quiet Isle keeps its graves. Then to Bravos." "Bravos," Jon said. As if the word were a coin between his teeth, he tasted dragon in. "Will they let you go and take pieces of their craft?" "They will try not to," Arya said. She remembered the smell of water in the big hall and the candles whose light did not ripple on the pool's surface. She remembered a voice that called her child and made it an endearment and an erasure. She had died there more than once. She had learned how to be alive. They taught me and I left. No one leaves. They will make their anger in the old way. Will you kill them? Sansa asked, not because she wanted a promise, but because she wanted the dark to be named. I will offer them a trade, Arya said. Death for death. Their names whispered for the names of those they have stolen. They can put a few of their faces in a place where a different god is served. They can let me make a door in a wall, and when fear comes to be fed, it will be turned away hungry. If they won't take the trade, I will make it anyway. You will bleed, Brienne said softly. I have bled, Arya said. The body remembers. Jon's hand found her shoulder. There was a tenderness in the weight of it that had nothing in it of pity. Take Ghost, he said. Let men see what watches with you. Ghost chooses, she said and turned. The direwolf looked at her as if to say, I chose when you were small and smelled like summer. He stood and stretched, and his ribs showed in the lantern light. He had been fed, but he had not chosen to be fat. All right, Arya said. He comes. They slept a few hours, if sleep deserves the word, when dreams ride you instead of the other way around. When the dawn came thin and bruised over the masts in the harbor, Arya walked down with Ghost at her heel. The docks were waking. Fisher wives with cracked open laughter and a pink boil on a thumb, boys with knives for cutting rope and fish-conning gulls out of innards, men who swore to gods in 3 languages about tariffs that had not been invented yesterday. Warden, said a voice, soft and dragging as if the owner were moving an anchor. Ternezio Terry's looked no older and entirely older. The great sweeps of his mustache had gone white. His eyes were clever, the cleverness of a man who keeps a list of slights and does not waste any. Bravos you are wanting. I'm wanting a deck that smells of salt instead of people, Arya said. Do you still sail for the Titan? I sail for coin and company, he said. The Titan takes both. He looked at Ghost and sighed as if he had been hoping the dog was Rumor. He pays in meat, I think. He pays in silence if he dislikes you, Arya said and smiled, and Ternezio Terry's made the sign men make who reflexively bargain with the gods for the conversation to pass their house as if it were a contagious weather. They cast off on a rising tide. The city dropped behind them, the red keep's splintered bones stabbing the cloud. Gull cries cut the morning like wire. The sails bellied and took the sun. A good wind pushed them, and the sea accepted their course with an old shrug that did not care about men's plans. Ghost lived at the prow where salt spray made him look made of frost. Arya sat with her back to a coil of rope and sharpened needle until the light slid along the steel the way a knife goes through a skin when you do it right. The dragonglass chips at her temples were cold even in sun. She did not take the circlet off. You didn't put a blade in its sheath because it was pretty. On the second day out, when the water went the pale, indiscriminate blue of coins from a dozen mints, a boy climbed up from below with a wet sour smell and a wobble. He had hair like a rat and eyes too old. He stood with his hands at his sides as if tied there by imaginary rope. Hungry? Arya asked. He looked at Ghost and then at her and shook his head. Lies. His bones spoke louder than his tongue. She tossed him a heel of bread and he caught it like he'd been catching things all his life and they had never been thrown for him. What's your name? She asked. Murray, he said. That could have been a lie too, but the way he said it sewn. Dead like something had been stolen and this was what was left. Have you cut anyone? Arya asked. She made her voice as soft as she knew how. Only rope, he said, a little defiance on the edge of the old eyes. And a purse that the man had not noticed. Arya said, you will not cut people because someone gives you a coin. Not for meat, not for a roof. If someone tells you it is a good trade, I will show you a better one. I need eyes that see and ears that carry what they hear without bleeding. I need hands that can tie good knots and carry a lantern steady. You would be my lantern bearer. He blinked. He had no place inside him for such an offer and he was looking for a shelf to put it on. I am no one, he said quickly, as if he had that phrase ready like a knife under a rag. Arya laughed. That is a bigger lie than your stomach. You are Murray and you have a sister somewhere who used to twist your ear when you would not go for water. You have a scar on your left knee and you tell stories about it. You like the deck better than the hold and the sky better than roofs. You hate men whose fingernails are clean. If I am wrong about any of that, you may throw this bread at me." He looked down at his knee and touched it and stared as if that piece of him had just introduced itself. "How?" he began, and then ran out of breath. Ghost stood and came 3 steps and sank down again. His breath smelled of fish. The boy reached out and Ghost didn't bite him, which for Ghost was an embrace. "We will make a thing," Arya said, watching him stroke the coarse white hair with one dirty hand. "It will not be a church you sleep in or a noose you wear. It will be a good thing. You will keep those who have no knives safe from those who have too many. Do you want that?" He nodded. He didn't know if he wanted it. He wanted the person who had said such a thing to be right about anything. That would do. She would teach him to want it for its own sake. The Titan rose out of the sea like a mountain that had made its own legs and then forgot to move. Its bronze threw back the light. The horn sounded and men on ladders made like flies on a god's shin. Bravos lay calm behind it, its islands joined by bridges that were as much habit as stone. Water was the city's muscle. It went everywhere it wanted and brought everything with it. The House of Black and White was not on a hill because there are no hills in Bravos. The world went down to Craning Canal and up to steps no wider than a man's patience. Arya felt the coin in her boot as a heat though it had never warmed. She climbed the old steps and opened the door. The smell was the same as always. Still water, old cloth, incense made of things that were not flowers. She let it enter her lungs and did not let it drive out her own breath. The kindly man was there. He must have waited, or else he never left that hall and only put on different faces to keep from going mad. His face now was the one that made her ache in the place where you remember you were a child and someone stroked your hair in the night when you were sick. "Child," he said. His voice put a weight on the word that made it an embrace. "You died, and still you walk." "I died and walked because I did not stay," Arya said. Her English sounded like Bravosi when she was angry. She let it. "And because those I loved did not die. I was not no one. That saved me." "Names are like stones in the hem of a dress," he said. "They make you walk slowly until you decide to drown. Or they make your hem heavy enough to hold in a wind," she said. "I have come to bargain." "Death is not a bargaining god," the kindly man said mildly. "He is the only god who does not care what you call him." "You care," she said. "You take coins for men who want a death, and you make Alyssa's work into a theology. You sell an end and call it equal, and perhaps it is sometimes, but you have forgotten to ask for whom. I will give you a door in the west, a place in a hall I have made. You will send a few of your faces to watch. You will hear the names of those we will not kill and the names of those we must. You will see, perhaps, that many deaths are not owed." A door. He tasted the word. Once she had thought her own tongue would fall out in that hall if she said her name too loudly. "We have doors. You have doors for those who want to leave holes in the world shaped like their enemies," she said. "I offer you a door for those who want to make fewer holes." "You think you can choose better than gods," said a voice beyond him, not the waif, who would have killed her already where she stood for the sport of it, but another with a thinner patience. "I think gods like it when we try," Arya said, and the kindly man did not smile but his eyes showed a softness like old leather. "You will take something that is not yours and make it your own," he said. "You will make fear a dog and put a collar on it that says your name. You will fail. You will be eaten. I am curious to see how long it takes. Then bless me with curiosity and not with a knife," she said. "I have not come to kill your men. Though when they come for me, some will die." "You admit it will come to that," the kindly man said. "Good. Your honesty is a knife you do not hide. Put it on the table, child." He gestured to the pool, to the columns, to the 100 faces that were and were not on the walls. "Do your work and let me watch if it makes you brave." She left the hall with a heaviness that felt less like doom and more like a promise. In the canal light, women with blackened teeth were hanging orange shells. A man with a tattoo of 100 eyes on his scalp sat very still and did not watch anything. She found Tycho Nestoris before sundown. He was in a counting house with shutters that made a fine shadow when the light slid through the slats. He had not grown shorter. At a guess, he had not bent in a long time. "Lord Nestoris," she said, and he lifted his dark brows over eyes that never once forgot a number. He offered her wine as if his office required it, and she drank as if hers did not forbid it. "We will not loan you money to pay murderers to be less murderous," he said. Men always leaped 3 turns into a conversation and assumed they would land on their feet. "I have not asked," she said. "I have asked for your quiet. You have lent quiet often enough and been paid in gold. Lend it to me and I will be paid in people you can tax." "You speak the other direction around," he said. "Yet I know the song. When men are less afraid, they spend more and revolt less. You will make lanterns against shadows. I will make men who know shadows hold lanterns without using them as torches," she said. "If you lend me your quiet, I will give you fewer fires in the alleys where your coin sleeps." He lifted a ledger and set it down. A small dust cloud rose and became another thing the sun could measure. "You speak like a man of bravos," he said. She knew he meant it as compliment and insult. "You speak like a Stark. I will let my ears be your friends. I will do nothing that takes a line in a book." "That is what you ask, yes?" "Yes," she said. "A line would kill us faster than knives. Will you speak to the house?" He pressed his lips together long enough that she could have written a history in his silence. "I will not speak to the house. They do not like me when I do not bring them coins with my words. I will speak to 3 men who like me. They will call the house." "Good," she said. "Thank you." "I did not do this because you said thank you," he said. "I know," Arya said. "But I will say it anyway." She gathered. That was her work for a month. To go through alleys she knew how to walk without making noise and find people who no longer trusted their own feet if they were not planning to use them to run away. Some had been the spider's little birds once. They had scars under their tongues like silvery fish. She took them to a kitchen by the Purple Harbor where a woman who had been a mummer and a midwife made stew out of things less suitable to put names to and never once let a child leave with hunger in their mouth. She told those children stories about lanterns. Not the pretty ones where light finds the way in the snow to a cottage that is always warm. The stories where you have one hand for the lantern and one for the ledge and you do not let go of either even when somebody shouts that you are selfish. She found one of the sorrowful men of Karth, far from home, older than he had a right to be with his poison's cautions. He had a small vial of pale tears pinned inside his cuff with a safety the size of a bean. He wore the pin as if it were his name. "You can mourn the old days," she said. Standing across a table from him in a house with mirrors he had paid too much for to prove to himself he still had money. "But you could also mourn early. Help me and you will be less sad." He laughed for the first time in what was likely years. She convinced him of 2 things: that he was tired and that his tiredness might be knowledge. She found a woman from Lys who called herself Cindia and smelled of oranges and cardamom, and had killed men for less than she had been paid. Cindia listened to the shape of Arya's promise as if testing cloth. "I will not carry your lantern like a penance," Cindia said. "I will carry it like a weapon." "A lantern can be both," Arya said. "It is a light that can be thrown to the ground to start a fire. But I will put water at the feet of those who hold them." "You want me because I can climb a wall without being seen," Cindia said. "I want you because you remember every child you killed, even when you were paid so well you were supposed to forget," Arya said. Cindia's eyes flinched. She said yes, and then made her face the face of a woman who had not been flinched at. When Arya returned to King's Landing with her ship of small promises, the dragon pit looked less like a mouth and more like a bowl for mixing. She took rooms in a house 2 streets off the Street of Steel where the walls had not been entirely burned. She took the circlet from her hair and hung it on an iron peg when she slept, as if to say, "I can put it on again." She boiled water until the smell of smoke pulled out of her hair. John came with Ghost, who knew the way and always walked as if he were the one who had made it. Davos brought bread. Sam brought parchments with names that wanted to be laws. Brienne brought 2 of her knights who knew how to stand in a doorway and not appear to be there. You cannot banish fear with a law, Sansa wrote from Winterfell in a tight, clear hand that did not waste iron gall. You can only starve it. Starve it of lies, starve it of doors left open, starve it of indulgence. Feed the things that fear goes hungry near. Honor, neighborly noise, too much laughter. Make your lantern bearers laugh. Make them eat in public. You think I am playing at being sweet. I am making you an army in a way that will be hard to kill. Arya read the letter at the cedar table and smiled when she didn't mean to. Jon read it and tasted how it would sound coming out of Sansa's mouth, and his eyes softened. He had a patched cloak on his shoulders with a piece of soft white fur at the throat, not for warmth, but because Ghost would put his head there when the man sat. Eat with them, Jon said to her, of her lantern bearers. Let them see you put bread in your mouth and crumbs in your lap. The first man who makes you into a shadow will do it at a dinner he doesn't want you to attend. I will eat, Arya said. I am hungrier now than when I was small and had nothing. The first weeks had a shape she did not hate. Mornings in the new hall where sunlight slanted through shutters and the dust hung in it as if it had weight. Hours in alleys where the things that needed hearing were being said in quiet ways. Evenings at the cedar table. Again to weigh what was gathered and say what could be done. She learned to speak with charwomen and goldcloaks, with sailors and wives who forgot sailors big and small. She told men who wanted to sell their enemies to her that she was not buying. She told those who told her she was building a new web that there were no webs, only ropes, and ropes were for climbing and hauling as much as for tying men down. A rumor sprang up that she cut tongues. She did not. She answered by sending Marae and Cindia to the fish market with a basket of stale bread, and they fed birds with their palms. She answered by walking the street of silk with Brienne in daylight and stopping mid-block to tie a small girl's hair back with a strip of cloth because it had fallen into her stew and the child had begun to cry. Brienne held the bowl. The child ate. Someone said, "They're pretending." And someone else said, "If pretending makes stew, I'll let them." In the third month, a piece of old shadow took a living shape. They found the boy's body under the second archway in Cobbler's Alley, small enough to fit in a fish basket. He had a bruise like a little moon under his jaw. He had a scar on his tongue that had been made by a blade. Ghost found him first because blood told truth to noses longer and more honest than men's. Arya lifted the body as if he would wake if she did it gently and wanted to go back to a game she had interrupted. Marae stood and shook as if his bones wanted to be loose stones that someone could kick down a slope. Cindia put a hand on the boy's hair as if the child were hers and she had misplaced him for a day and the guilt would never leave. The spider had little birds, someone said in the crowd that had gathered. The crowd always gathers around small bodies. The Warden of Shadows has little mice. This is what happens to mice and birds. Arya looked up at the voice and found the mouth it had come from. A thin-lipped one with a scar that had been made with a gentle blade by someone who knew how to make pain stay until it wanted to be a story. "Give me your name," she said. The man swallowed. The crowd wanted a spectacle. She wanted a name. "Rost," he said. "Rost," Arya said, speaking it as if she might put it in her mouth and chew it for a while. "You will come with me now and tell me where you were last night. You will show me your hands and I will smell your nails. If you run, Brienne will walk and then she will run and you will be sorry you made that happen." Rost did not run. His nails smelled of lamp oil and fish, not children. He had been in a house with a tarred roof where men played dice and wept when they lost but pretended they hadn't. He had said the thing he had said because fear needed a mouth. She didn't cut his tongue. She made him carry the boy's body with her to the Sisters of the Seven and help wash it while the sisters sang the song about a garden where there is never any winter. She found the man who had cut the boy's tongue. She found him because shadows talk to those who listen. He was a man who had served Qyburn and then thought that because Qyburn had died, the trades he taught were immortal. He was Maester Lucan, called so by men who were too lazy or mean to be precise. He had a room of vials and a room with instruments with fine points that were always clean. He kept a ledger in which he wrote that he gave boys work and girls virtue. Arya read the ledger and the letters hopped like fleas. She let Ghost smell the paper and then she let Ghost smell him. Some truths deserve teeth. She took him in the light with witnesses. Sam stood on one side with 2 pages, one to read and one to write. Davos stood on the other as if measuring length for a rope. Zendaya watched the door. Murray held the lantern and his hands did not shake. Arya spoke the boy's name into air, and it was heavy enough to make Lucan's knees consider the floor. "You used fear to make obedience," she said. "That is the oldest trade. You ruled in a closet and made it a kingdom. The child is dead. You will not live a long time." He sneered because men like him think sneers are armor. "You cannot make me die," he said. "The king does not make death sentences without a trial papers long as my arm." "The king will not," Arya said. "But the Warden of Shadows keeps a different book. You killed a child to teach other children silence. You ruled with fear. The politics you practiced are over." He spat, which made her grateful because it reminded everyone that he had a mouth. She spoke his name into the room and said, "Remember this one." She made it quick. "Death is owed and sometimes you pay it in copper or silver." This was silver. She washed her hands afterward and they smelled of wine and soap and a small boy's hair. There was a piece of law to write the next morning. Sam wrote it. "Those who rule with fear and make law out of terror are outside the king's peace," he wrote, and Arya said yes and signed with a hand that did not want to shake and did not. She slept that afternoon and woke in a cold sweat because the kindly man had been counting in her dream and his numbers had been names. It did not take long for the other things to come. The letters slipped under doors like mice, the whisper that the Warden of Shadows was making a new crown with the names of children, the rumor that boys were being taught to watch through keyholes and girls to poison their mothers. Sansa wrote again, "Rumor is another kind of hunger. Feed your own first. Put tables in the courtyards of the old keep and feed until someone says you are a fool." Arya did. The bread lines snaked up the hill, and Davos remarked, "We are making a parade. I hope it is more cheerful tomorrow." It was. Gendry arrived with 3 iron rings in a sack and ash on his cheeks. He had ridden from Storm's End because he liked the smell of a forge on a road. He set the pins on the cedar table and they were what Jon had said. Black iron with a SMA. A low lantern in the wolf's jaws. The lantern had a bit of mica in it that caught light and did not think it should keep it. The object wanted to be touched. Murray reached and then stopped and then reached again. "Don't mind the soot," Gendry said. "It will never come off. That is a mercy. It will keep you honest about where you've been." He and Arya walked out after with Ghost in their wake, down to the edge of the Blackwater where the tide pushed up against old scum and new. They stood where a broken bit of a ship had lodged against a piling and thought of the river without saying the words out loud because the river stayed if you did not name it. "You've made a thing," Gendry said. "I have," Arya said. She looked at his face and thought how faces become their work. He wore the work of making on his brow. Suited him. "Everyone will tell me it's something else. They told me my lordship was a joke," he said with a half smile. "I made a city wall out of it. People will call you the king's knife. Make them a way to cut bread." "Bread is harder to cut than throats," she said. He shrugged. "More satisfying, though." When the day came she had known would come, it came after a week of rain that made the alleys sweat and the high windows weep. The cart came first, rumbling over cobbles with the slow certainty of something that believes it cannot be stopped. 2 men walked beside it. One wore a hood though it was day, and the other wore a hat that made him look like a fisherman who had sold enough fish to pretend he had never smelled of them. They stopped in the Square of Serpents and drew a circle with chalk. People began to gather because people always gather when a circle appears. They want to see what will walk out of it. The hat man produced a parchment and began to read in a voice that was too thin for the square. Hear ye, he said. Let the city know its own. The Warden of Shadows is the king's secret tyrant and has killed children to frighten their fathers. Let her come and answer here, and let us put the questions fear has been asking us. Else we shall put her name to the fire and send it across the bridges. Arya walked into the square without cloak or circlet. Zendaya walked with her and a boy from the kitchens with a bowl of figs that he held as if he had been told that if he spilled any the city would fall. Ghost came another way and sat under a fruit seller's cart and made no sound. The rain had washed the square clean and small streams still ran. Someone had laid planks and the people walked them without thinking. Arya stepped off the plank into water. Soaked her boot. Good. She looked at the man with the hat. He had a kind face that had been taught to pretend not to. The hooded man did not lift his head. The hood was too new. The cloth did not know the shapes under it. Arya said, "I am here. Ask me a question." It was too easy. The hat man glanced sideways as if to say, "Not yet. Not like this." The hood twitched. Arya said, "Ask me what you are afraid of." "Who do you answer to?" a woman asked from the crowd. Her hair was in a net and she had a scar along one cheekbone that did not make her less beautiful. "I answer to the names of the living," Arya said. "I said so when the king named me. I answer to councils made of small people. I answer to a thing you can see, not a whisper. If you want to join such a council, I will listen." "Who pays you?" a man called. "You do," Arya said. "By not dying and not killing because you were afraid, and by buying bread without someone's head as a coin. If you want to pay me in gold, I will buy lanterns." The hood lifted fractionally. A gloved hand reached out from within it with a small clay pot. Arya nearly smiled. As if she had never been in Bravos. As if she did not know what a pot like that would do to the first heave torch. "Catch," the hooded man said, and tossed the pot. He moved his arm as if he had thrown fewer things than he wished. The pot arced. It was the prettiest part of a man's cruelty. The physics that cannot help being handsome. Sandia was already moving. She plucked a cloth from under a fruit man's elbow, caught the pot in it, and wrapped it fast, fingers so quick her rings were streaks. She dropped it into the boy's bowl of figs. The figs made a soft sound like a small animal thinking about sleep. Smoke began to creep but no flame. The boy stared at his ruins and then ate a fig by reflex as big eyes watched him do it and laughed. Arya moved. She put her hand under the hood and found the jaw there and turned the head up and saw the face she had expected to see. Not a face she knew, but one that had been chosen because it could be anyone. Any man with a thin mouth and a little mole at the corner of it. She thumb-swept the hood back. The crowd pulled in a breath. You cannot turn a rumor into a thing you can see and not change the rumor. "This is called the Harrower," Arya said. "He belongs to a company of men who want to be given back fear like a stolen horse. They are not a god, nor are they clever. They call themselves the 13th tongue and believe they will speak through your children as if their mouths are a river. They tied a rope to a boy's tongue and pulled. They have hired men from across the narrow sea who say words as prayer but mean them as poison. If you see one of them, do not set him on fire. Throw fruit until he flees, then call a lantern." The hood man jerked. He had a blade in his sleeve. Men who wished to hide what they did always did. He brought it down toward her wrist because he had practiced that movement more than any other. Arya let him almost get there. Then she stepped inward, and her elbow met his arm, and the blade fell. He was good. He recovered and grabbed. He had hands like a baker with nails he kept clean. She turned and he was on the ground as if he had fallen asleep and the dream had tripped him. Sandia had his other arm. The hat man had begun to read again. But the parchment had holes where the rain had made insults. The crowd did not have fire, and this time that was good. They had fruit. The hood man left the square with a pear on his head, a fig pasted to his cheek by its own sugar, and a pomegranate that had burst on his chest like a heart. "Take him to Brienne," Arya said, "and take the other. He is less guilty, but he came to help." When Jon heard, he said, "I do not want any more demonstrations." Arya heard the ghost of a joke in his voice and decided to let it live for the day. The 13th tongue did not like being made ridiculous. Fear likes to look handsome. They set the next cart near the Street of Sisters, with a slatted box on it that moaned. They would have let something out, a dog or a girl, and made their theater. The lantern-bearers arrived first, Murray with the pin at his throat and a basket of lemons that made his hands smell clean. He smiled like a boy whose smile had been taught a secret. He wrapped the slats with rope and stood on the cart. "No stage plays today," he said. "Open markets only." The crowd laughed. The laughter made the men who had planned to cut ropes and throats look small. Arya had known from the beginning there would be the other danger, that those she taught would take to the thing and then, intoxicated by their own righteousness, would begin to use it like a cudgel. She watched Marae for that tilt. She watched Sandia for the bored cruelty that comes of thinking you know best. She spoke the names of those they had helped in front of them, for protection and for warning. Braavos sent her its own reminder that no god likes to be told where to put his feet. She woke one night to the sound of water where there should have been stillness. Ghost was standing at the foot of her bed with his ears like arrows. She had known he would wake if death came, and he did. She slid off the bed and put her back to the wall and took needle and the small narrow blade she had carried since Braavos and then forsaken and now took up again because old friends deserve your palm sometimes. The window was open. A woman stood in it like an upright question. "I know your face," Arya said. The woman smiled. She had a scar at the corner of her lip Arya had once made on a different face. "You know the line between your own eyes too well," the woman said. "You think it will keep you on feet that do not slip. This city has too many stones." She moved very fast. She did not try to be silent. Her foot hit the corner of a trunk and made a sound that distracted no one. The blade came in straight. Arya lifted hers and the steel kissed. Ghost had already moved. The woman leapt away and landed on the sill. She had placed her feet there before and could do it without looking. She made the motion with her free hand, the one that meant, "Come if you are honest." Arya did not. Ghost did. He hit the woman mid-torso and teeth met flesh. The woman screamed a word in a language freshly learned. Ghost's weight took her over the sill and down into the alley, where she hit the wet with a sound like a dropped sack of flour. She flailed. He let go and she ran, leaving a thin red line on the wall where she scraped a shoulder. Arya looked out and did not follow. The alley had more than two places to die. She leaned her head against the sill and breathed. She thought of Braavos and its faces and its way of calling mercy blasphemy. In the morning she would send a letter to the kindly man. It would say, "I have received your curiosity." He would not laugh. He would write back to say, "The god is very bored. Entertain him." She would keep breathing and call that entertainment. She named her order officially in the 4th month. After enough days had gone by that a name would not feel like a boast. The Wardens of Shadows, the Lantern Bearers. She laid out their code in Sam's hand and Davos's voice and Sansa's laughter at the part about eating. She printed the code on parchment and posted it in markets and water halls, where the damp made the ink run if the reader did not move his eyes fast enough. We watch in the places others do not. We speak the names we serve. We do not buy or sell deaths. We do not rule with fear. We are seen when we act. The North took you into it if you did not try to be important. She led it. She ate with her lantern bearers at a long table in Winterfell that had been sanded down so many times you could see the ghosts of old knife scratches if the light was right. The child Willa told her, "You look shorter than I thought." And Arya said, "I am closer to the ground than I ought to be." And they both grinned. "You made a thing," Sansa said, when they stood on the ramparts with their cloaks whipping and their hair going where the wind ordered. "You made an order. Do you know what that makes you?" "Tired," Arya said. "Dangerous," Sansa said. But there was a softness in it, as when a mother says, "You can go as far as the old oak but not beyond." You know what fear looks like. Be careful not to think everything that isn't your lantern looks like fear. Arya smiled with one half of her mouth. "I like it when you pretend to teach me." "You like it when I am wrong," Sansa said. "You will not like this part. A man will come with a pretty story. He will say he has lost his daughter or his honor or his way. He will want your lantern. You will hand it to him just a little to see what he does. He will steal it. Watch for him." Sansa's eyes were chips of winter sky. "He will be kind." She returned south with a fresh sense of the weight of names and a head that had breathed air clean enough to make city air taste like beer gone bad. She found Jon with a new problem. The faith was writing songs again. It had made new holy men since its last fell into rubble. The songs were pretty and their rhymes worked. "They sing your name with shadows and harrows and sparrows," Jon said, sprawling at the cedar table with his legs too long for politeness. They make you a watchman that does not sleep and then complain when you do. Let them, she said. So long as they don't make men and children into sermons. If they do, I will go to their September and eat with them. That will confuse them and they will write quieter songs. They may five you, Davos said, smiling at his own joke and then apologizing for the joke and then deciding not to. Make sure the stew is not last Tuesday heated again. A year turned. The Wardens of Shadows made mistakes and did not pretend not to. One of them, a man called Koss with a lazy eye that took in more than he wished, killed a cutpurse who had never cut more than rope. Koss swore the boy had had a blade for that afternoon that would have gone into a small girl's back at the fish stalls. Arya listened to everyone who had seen the day it had not yet become and could not find the blade. She put Koss's pin on the cedar table and called the council that had no place for lords. I am sorry, Koss said, and his voice was as flat as knives on wood. We do not rule with fear, Arya said. We do not rule with righteousness either. We will not make ourselves kings who kneel are our own altars. You will go north and walk with Willa for a season. If you learn how to listen without thinking what you hear is a plan, you will come back. He went and came back different. He smiled more and killed less and saved one child from a well by tying himself to a rope and going down where he could not see. He wept afterward because fear had not had him until after. The 13th tongue did not stop making mouths. They used pricey men who came from islands where the syllables of their names felt like fishbones. They hired a bravo who had once called a girl with a threadbare cloak Sweetling in an alley and kept his skin for his error by learning humility. They sent a message, a face on a wall, a word scrawled in eel's blood. We have a list, too. Arya wrote back with another word. Stop. They replied with a smaller word. No. No is a word you respect. You cannot carve a yes out of it. You can only build a bridge around it and make the man who said it walk across. She said a net. She refused 3 lords who wanted her to use their grudges as practice. She eliminated 2 men quietly and with witnesses, because they created fear to climb and then they set up home at the top like a man who has never been cold. When the day came that nearly ended the new way, it came on a day like any other. The wind blew ash into hair and doorways. What ash remained now a very fine thing, almost polite. Jon had called a conclave at the Dragon Pit for lords and low ones both. The Wardens of Shadows were to explain themselves and be cursed and praised in equal measure and go home with more bruises than before. Tycho Nestoris attended, which meant numbers had decided to sit in a ruined amphitheater and stare at swords. He had 2 men with him who carried ledgers as weapons. Arya stood on the stone where she had been crowned and felt the seam between then and now. Jon walked out and the crowd quieted. The quiet that comes of knowing the person you are looking at will not make himself pretty for you. He spoke. We have learned how to end fear by using up all our adjectives, he said, and men smiled before they knew they would. Now we are learning to end it by making less of it. The Wardens. A shape moved in the aisle 3 tiers up. It was not a man. It was the idea of a man. Hooded, robed, the movements precise and practiced. He lifted both hands and the crowd's gaze lifted. 2 small clay pots arced. One would have struck where Jon stood, the other where Tycho sat. Men moved, the slow motion of speed when everything else stops. Arya ran. Ghost ran. Zendaya moved where she already stood, a position she had remembered. The pots cracked in the air as arrowheads pierced them. Brienne had a man with a bow behind the dais because she trusted in good archers more than in good luck. Fire fell in beads instead of a wave. Arya reached the figure and found it empty. The robe collapsed around a weighted frame. She looked down and saw a little tongue nailed to a bit of wood. A message. The fear was not the fire. It was the theater that would say, your lanterns will not help. This is a puppet master. The real one came from the tunnels below, a man with hands so clean it made the air uncomfortable. Maester Lu had had an apprentice. That man had been the one who knew to prepare a weighted frame. He moved toward the dais with a blade that had not yet met air. He was kind-faced. The kindness had been practiced to the point of habit. He smiled and men's shoulders loosened because kindness is a weapon that does not look like one. Arya met him in the place between tiers where, Long ago, chains had run to dragon stalls. "You should smile less," she said, and he smiled more, and then she cut his smile. It was not an elegant fight. The old ways do not permit much elegance. He moved well and thought well and tried to give her what fear had taught him. Men who had learned to think with their knives always did. She used her shoulder and her elbow and her knee. The blade he held clattered and fell and skated and struck a stone and jumped. He made a sound like a wineglass when it breaks and looks like a flower for half of a heartbeat. Ghost hit him in the same breath, and that ended the half measures. She stood with her hands shaking a little because everyone knew that if a hand shakes after, it learned something. She looked up and saw the crowd moving like a field in wind. Tycho Nestoris remained sitting, his fingers on his ledger as if numbers could quiet fire. Jon's gray eyes had gone more pale. He looked at her and shook his head once, not no, but yes, do the thing you are about to do. Arya walked back to the dais and lifted her voice. "This is how we will end the politics of fear," she said. "With witnesses and with the truth named in short words. We will not call our knives something else. We will not put our lanterns down when someone shouts at us to do it because they have built a stage. We will eat in public and laugh and teach children to tie knots, and we will not make a god of secret cleverness. If I break this, you will throw fruit at me. If any of mine break this, throw fruit, and if fruit fails, call Brienne of Tarth." Brienne inclined her head and drew her sword a little, and sunlight took interest in the idea of steel. After that, the 13th tongue withered. Not because Arya hunted every man who had once cut a child. You cannot hunt something that grew in the habit of men like mold. It withered because markets forgot to be afraid for long stretches and laughter starved it, and mothers felt it had become less necessary to teach their sons to lie, and girls learned to run with lanterns and not to run away from them. It withered because lords saw fewer uses for terrors, and men like Tycho began to make marginal notes in ledgers like expenditure on mummers and staged rumors. Unprofitable. Bravos kept trying, but less. The kindly man wrote her a letter, in the neat hand he adopted when he wanted to look like a schoolteacher and not a priest of a god you cannot name and keep in your mouth. He wrote, "You are making a shape that will not last because it is made of people. The house makes shapes that last because they are made of stone and death. Yet I find I prefer yours." It was a kindness she would not tell anyone he had made. He would deny it, and he would not be lying. On a day when the heat made men silly and the fish stink of the market rose and rose until it sat like a friend on shoulders, Arya sat on the steps of her house 2 streets off the Street of Steel and thought of what it meant that she would never be no one again. She watched Murray play a game of circles with 3 girls who had scars on their tongues and had learned to say their names again. Cyndia sat with her back to the door frame and sharpened a blade as if it were not a blade but a thing made to keep hands busy. Jon walked up the street as if he were a man going to market and not a man going to rewrite stories. He sat beside Arya and watched. The sweat made his hair dark where it touched his brow. "This will not be enough," he said, because he was who he was. "There will be a famine, and we will have to salt fear and eat it for a while. There will be a war because someone always says, 'I want what you have and I do not want to ask for it.' There will be a man with a pretty story, and we will hand him a lantern and he will drop it on dry straw. But when they write songs, they will have to work harder to make the rhymes." Arya said, "I do not care about songs." It was a lie, and she forgave herself for it. "You care about Murray," Jon said, as if the boy had been his idea. In a way, he had. "I do too." Ghost came and sat with his head against her knee so her kneecap remembered winter. She touched his ear and thought of Caitlyn's hands and of Sirio Farrell in a hall in King's Landing and of the way a body learns where knives go. She thought of names, and how they had saved her and could save other people if they were set enough in places where the stone had not been warmed. Next to them, a woman with no teeth left smiled a smile you do not see in a September or a castle. "My grandson was born last night," she told nobody in particular. "He is called Jory. His father wanted him called Jory because of the swordsman who died for Eddard Stark. I wanted him called Cider because I like it. We will see which name he grows." Arya snorted. "Make him learn both," she said. "When you have 2 names you can choose which one to be in the morning." "Like kings," the toothless woman said. "Like lantern bearers," Arya said. In the 7th year, Sansa came to King's Landing. Not because she had to, but because you only live once, and she wanted to put her hands on the cedar table and see if the grain was as smooth as the letters had implied. She brought with her Beth and Maud and Herod and Willa and Burin, because councils matter only when they are held in front of the people who made them. They sat in the new hall. Light skated the walls. Jon poured wine because that is a thing he did when he could not answer what people asked. Sansa placed her fingers on the table and said, "It is smooth. How did you keep men from carving their initials into it like stupid boys?" "I threatened to set Brienne at them," Jon said. "That would do," Sansa said. She looked at Arya as if to say, "I am proud and I will not say it because I do not want to turn it into a thing that eats." Arya accepted the sentiment in silence. Willa studied Ghost and wrote 3 lines about him in a book Burin had made her. Beth held a baby, hers now, and looked up as if to say, "He will not know the old stories," and Arya said, "Tell him the ones about bread." They went out into the heat together and down to the markets. A man with a hat sold oranges with a flourish that would have been a knife once. It was a flourish now. A woman sang under her breath while she went about setting out new cloth for sale. A tune that used to be sung to drown out the sound of men shouting for blood. It sounded better soft. Arya walked the street of sisters and did not think about the cart that had stood there and the slatted box with a moan inside. She thought about the boy with the bowl of figs. He had a little cart now and he sold figs sliced in quarters and drizzled with honey. He had burned many pots. It made you better at catching. Brienne sparred with 2 knights whose armor was too clean and made them sweat until their pride leaked and stained their cushioned armpits. Davos told a joke that did not make anybody pretend to laugh. They did it honestly. Sam taught a class in a courtyard and explained what the word witness means when you use it as a spell. Gendry shoeing a horse looked up and said, "Mind your toes." And the boy learning did and kept them. In the 9th year, Arya went back to Braavos. She did it because she had to see the house one more time and because the kindly man had written her that he was dying and wanted to show her the courtesy of having a face on for it. She went down the steps and into the smell that she had swallowed before without tasting. He sat by the pool with the candles. His face was the one she liked least. Young and kind. She sat beside him with her feet not quite touching the water and remembered how once she'd thought she would drown without drowning. "I am going," he said. "You are going," she said. She did not take his hand. She did not insult him. "Your door has not been used enough," he said. "Men think the god prefers ours. But I leave it. Doors can be found by those who want to go through them. I have a boy named Murray," she said suddenly because the name wanted to be in this room. "He can catch fire in a cloth like he invented it." He remembers his sister's ear. The kindly man's eyes warmed as if remembering a single summer. "You remember the names of the living." "I said I would," she said. "You lied about many things," he said. "Not about that." His breath thinned. "You have made fear a smaller god." "No," she said, and thought of nights when she'd woken and the air had sat on her chest and made her arms too heavy. "I've made laughter stronger. I've made witness a weapon. Fear is still a god." He nodded and died the way a candle goes. "Not as much dramatics as you think there will be." She sat with him until the water stopped making the little sounds paper makes when a child turns it with small, damp fingers. She went to the door he had offered her to open. She put her hand on it. It opened. She went through and stood in a place where lanterns hung in rows and each had a name scratched into the base. She stood a long time and read. She came back out and said to the empty hall, "Thank you." The hall said nothing because it was not rude and also because it was not a person. Years make things you did not plan to make. The Wardens of Shadows grew older and turned into something else called the Lanterns, when the old name got heavy with its own righteousness. Murray grew to have a voice that men listened to without knowing why. Sandia went home to Lys and wrote letters that sounded like spice and salt. Koss died in his bed with a girl holding his hand. A grown woman now who had kept her tongue and her laugh. Willa grew and said, "I could be the Warden of Shadows one day." And Sansa said, "You could be anything that doesn't make you small." Brienne kept her sword clean and never drew it for anything that would not look her in the face. Jon got older and kept not wearing a crown. His hair went white at the temples like a man whose lantern blinked but did not go out. He sat on walls and looked out and said, "That wind smells like trouble." And it usually did. He had children he did not mean to have, and he taught them to tie knots before he taught them to ride horses, which seemed backward until a storm came, and then it was obviously right. Ghosts stayed and then one day did not and went north to where wolves live longer and where snow knows their names. Jon's eyes had that far-off piece of them again for a month, and then he smiled at something small and let the far-off become a place he went when nobody needed him for a while. Arya walked cities and sat in kitchens and held a lantern over holes and found that sometimes you do not need to go down because seeing the hole is enough to keep a child from it. She killed less than anyone thought she did and more than she could count on her fingers. She spoke the names of those she took because you can owe a god and still be stubborn about the way you pay. She ate in public and did not learn to dance because she had no rhythm that men could predict. She laughed with children and did not let them make her a story that slept too well on winter nights. She kept a blade at her back and a coin in her boot and a weight in her chest that sometimes felt like love and sometimes like iron. If you had asked her what she had done, she would have said, "I taught shadows how to keep watch." If you had told her that she had ended Westeros's politics of fear, she would have snorted and said, "For now." But the small folk did not talk about politics when they had something more interesting to talk about, like stew or babies that would not stop making noise or lanterns that did not go out in a wind. When a man tried to build a power on fear, they laughed first now. They called for a lantern second. They took up fruit if they had to. That was the thing she had made. Not a law, not an order, not a crown or a song, but a habit. Habits last longer than gods if you put your hands on them every day. On the last night of a long summer that did not last long enough to be called peace, Arya sat on the roof of a house that had once been 3 houses. The moon hung like a coin some god had forgotten to spend. The air had that taste it gets when a storm is thinking hard about being born. She could hear a woman cleaning a pot in the next street, the soft ring of old iron and water. She could hear Jon telling a story to a child always 2 minutes away from sleep. And sleep like that is as holy as anything. She could hear someone playing a pipe in a window, a tune he would never perfect and would get right once when nobody was listening. He would forget and remember. That is how people are. He said, "Will you always be Warden?" "I will be Arya Stark," she said. "It is almost the same thing." "It is not the same thing at all." They sat with the lantern between their knees. Moths came and bumped at the glass. The light made moths' powder gild the air. In the street below, someone began to pray and changed his mind halfway through and turned it into a song. The moon moved a little. The storm thought harder and did nothing. When morning came thin and bruised, as it always insists on doing no matter what foolishness night brought or ended, Arya went down into the house and put bread on the table. Men and women and children came and cut slices and ate with open mouths. They spoke of nothing and everything. She asked for news and got gossip, which is the better kind. A girl said she wanted a knife and a boy said he wanted a broom, and the girl laughed at him and he laughed at himself, and then they both held the broom because it was large and unwieldy and needed 2 hands. They moved through their days not with the absence of fear. It is foolish to live like that, but with fear at the edges, where a lantern could reach if you lifted it high. Arya lifted hers when it was needed and hung it on a nail when it was not, and wiped the glass with the edge of her sleeve. She did not keep it polished like a relic. She cleaned it because if you do not, it grows hard to love. Sometimes, on market days when the bells rang in 3 towers for 3 reasons, she put the iron circlet on. It fit her differently as the years went. Came to sit on her like hair you've grown used to and forgot to cut. The dragonglass kept swallowing light and the pearl kept returning it. People pretended not to notice and then did. She raised a hand and men raised hands and women did and children did. And the whole city looked as if it were trying to catch something falling very softly. If they had then asked the city what it was catching, it might have said hope. Or else it might have said habit. Or else, if it had wanted to be honest in the way Arya Stark liked, it might have said each other.